Hello, and welcome to Sobercast. We provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in a podcast format. We are an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into the virtual basket. Also, if you're a member of NA or have friends that are, please tell them about our other podcast, NAPOD. NAPOD features NA speakers and workshops in the same format as Sobercast. We upload a new speaker every day, and it's easy to subscribe by searching for NAPOD, N-A-P-O-D, all one word, on any podcast player app, or go to napod.xyz if you'd like to listen online. Hope you enjoy the podcast and have a great day.
My name is Cheeky Charlie, and I too am an alcoholic. Well, the first thing I'd like to say is, may God bless all of you in this room. All of my friends. You know, there's no strangers in Alcoholics Anonymous. Only friends we haven't met yet. And I'm looking forward to the day that I can meet some of you again. I met some here a fortnight ago when I was over with dear Gordon, my best friend, not only in Alcoholics Anonymous, but out of it too. We've had 32 years of sheer friendship and joy. Thank you, Gordy, for that love, that understanding, and allowing me to teach you how to fish. Oh, God. Gordy and I used to go down and from our group on Friday night, and any newcomers or near new members said to go, Gordy and I would go back to the barge where Gordy worked, and we'd fish, and we'd talk to those new members and those first timers. And that's the love and the warmth of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's how this program works in my life, and no doubt in all of you good people's lives. And I'm a very blessed alcoholic, because sitting by my side is my darling wife, Sandra, to whom I love with all my heart and all my soul. And we've been together for a lot of years. Wonderful years. You know, alcoholics is not everything in our lives. We learn this when we join AA. We learn that there's a life after drinking. And that life that I have after drinking is built up around my darling wife and my family. I'm a very fortunate alcoholic, because none of my children have seen their father drunk. Isn't that a wonderful gift? A gift from a loving God, to whom I understand today. And before I go into my story, I would like to say one thing, that it was the greatest gift that God has ever given me in my life, was this wonderful, blessed fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. A little of my childhood. Well, my dear mother I never knew. My mother couldn't read or write, and she went to the local Adelaide hospital here, and she got some medicine, and she got some liniment, and in them days it was all in the same coloured bottles. And she got at one end of the arcade in our city, and I was about 2 years old in a pusher, and she took a dose of what she thought was her medicine, and she drank the liniment. And when she got to the other end of the arcade in the city, she dropped dead. And there I was, in my little pusher, with my mother laying dead. And of course I didn't know about it. And my father, he was an Afghan, and he drove camels all up through the Northern Territory. And I never knew him. I never ever met him. And my eldest sister had just recently got married, and she couldn't take me. So my second youngest sister took me down to my Uncle Bert's, that's my mother's brother. And she said, look, could you look after Charlie and rear Charlie? Which he did. But my stepmother never ever wanted me. And as I grew a little older, she treated me so cruelly. And she used to belt me with a piece of strap, horse harness, with the rivets still in the end of it, and there'd be welt marks all over my legs and my back. And I used to have to go to school like this. And she'd give me a belting for the least little thing. My grandfather had a big white cockatoo, and I could have killed that cockatoo many a time. I'd be out in the lane. There was a laneway down the side of our house, and I used to go and play down the lane with my friends in the street. And this cockatoo, this big white cockatoo, was Charlie, just like me mother. And I'd come running home, and I'd jump over the back fence, and I'd run inside puffing and panting, and I'd say, what do you want, Mum? She'd say, get out and play, you such silly so-and-so, I never called you. And I'd go out playing, of course. And the cocky often used to call my name, and I wouldn't come home. It's that cocky, I'd say. And when I got home, oh, holy God, I knew I was home. She used to get that strap and wail into me. And I put up with this for quite a few years, until I was about 13 and a half, and I run away from home. I couldn't take any more. And my Uncle Bert, I called him Dad, and he was good to me. He gave me 5 shillings and a loaf of bread. And he tied it up, and he tied it on a little stick, and I carried it over my shoulder. And he said, now whatever you do in life, son, he said, always comb your hair and keep it neatly combed, and always polish your shoes. Don't forget that, and you'll get on in life. And I went, and I got a job in a circus. Noel George's rodeo. And he taught me how to ride horses. And I used to go over the jumps. I used to jump over a jump, run up a ramp, and take off on this horse. And I'd clear 7 horses, side by side. They'd bring them out, and I'd clear them. I became a good rider. And that's what I did. I travelled all over Australia. And one day we were back in the city of Adelaide, and my boss of the circus, his best friend, he came down to visit him, and he seen me. And he said, I'd love that boy, because he told him a bit about my history. And he said, I'd love that young boy, that young man I was then, coming on. And he said, I'll give him a good home, and I'll give him a good life. Would you let me have him if he was willing to go? And to cut a big long story short, I said I would go with old Ted. And he took me under his wing, and he taught me the show game. I know everything about the show game. I know it back to front. We had the boxing tent, and I used to fight in the boxing tent, and I love fighting. Oh, I love fighting. Because every time I belted somebody in the ring, I'd be fighting away, and I'd get a hard hit. And as soon as I got hurt, a real hard hit, I'd see my mother-in-law's face on my opponent's shoulders, and look out, away I went. And that's what I was like. I had that much hate and venom in me. And we used to have the snake pit. And at one used to work 600 snakes. I had 600 snakes in a snake pit. And I used to milk them snakes, venomous snakes. We've only got 6 venomous snakes in Australia. And I used to milk them 6 venomous snakes. And I used to sell it to the universities anywhere in Australia that wanted venom. And I used to get, at that time, 35 pounds an ounce, and that was a lot of money in them days, because you all know that a pound is equivalent to $2. I used to put the venom in an oven, and it turns to crystals. And every ounce of crystals I got of the snake venom, I used to sell it. And I used to work the snakes in the pit. And you know, long before I got working snakes, and long before I was starting to fight, when we put the boxing crewper together, I was drinking. I started off having a drink with old Ted. I'd have one here and one there, and as it went on, I'd have a little more and a little more. And unbeknownst to me, the same as everybody in this room, I didn't know that I was different than my boss. I didn't know that I suffered with this terrible ism, alcoholism. And alcoholism got a good grip of me. I was physically, mentally bankrupt in every avenue of my life, in the later part of my life. And I only said here about 6 months ago, sitting at the kitchen table to my darling wife, I said, you know, darling, I always thought they'd find me laying dead in a gutter or down in the dump, because that's where I ended up in my drinking days. In between the show runs, we'd have a break, sometimes 5 weeks, 4 weeks, and I'd go out drinking, and I'd go through all my money. I'd end up drinking anything I could get to build up my false hopes to carry on. I ended up drinking methylated spirits out of jam tin down in our local dump. That's how bad I got through alcohol. I used to be terribly ashamed of drinking methylated spirits. But what choice did I have? I had to have a drink. I had to have a drink at any cost. And where did that drink I had to have end up? Well, I ended up in mental institutions. I ended up in prisons. Not big, long sentences. I'd get 21 days for drunk and disorderly, or a month for peeing in a doorway, in a shop doorway, or picked up for being vagged. All these things was happening to me. Why? I used to ask myself many a time, coming out of a real hard bender, why? Why is this happening to me? What's wrong with me? I'm not stupid. Handling myself. I was handling myself ever since I was 13 and a half. But you know, fighting isn't what gets you out of trouble. That's not handling yourself. And that's the only thing I knew, was how to get out of trouble by having a punch-up. Yes. Or going in and out of jail. If you hear any back talk, it's my wife getting onto our little dog, Woodsy. He starts barking and he gets our other two little dogs barking. She's gone out to round them up. I love her. But you know, alcohol took us all in many different places. And places we didn't want to go. Didn't it? I know it did to me. It taught me one good thing. It taught me how to hate so terrible. I hated and despised anything at any time. In Alcoholics Anonymous, something that I looked for years in a bottle and couldn't find. I got a real long sentence. Because I beat a copper up when I was in a pub. And I hammered him. And before I knew very much more, there were 3 police car loads of coppers pulled up at the pub in a little town in Victoria. And they belted the living daylights out of me. When they got me in the cell. It took a carload of coppers on their own to get me in the paddy wagon. And when they got me back into lockup, 4 of them come in and they beat me within an inch of my life. Nowhere on the face, all around the body, where the bruises wouldn't show. And then I fronted a magistrate. I think it was 3 or 4 days after. And he said, "Young man, I don't like putting young men in prison," but he said, "on your history, and you beating up a policeman, I'm afraid I've got to put you away for a long time." And I thought, oh God. I thought, oh, that don't sound very good. A long time. And he said, 1.5 years. And I went into prison. I never stopped getting into trouble even in prison. I was fighting all the time out in the yards. And when you can fight a bit, you know, everybody wants to beat you. Everybody wants to take you on. And even the guards in the prison when I got into a fight, they'd look around and just watch the fight. They didn't break me up or try to stop it. They'd let us fight it out, whoever I was fighting with. It wasn't much of a life, I can tell you. And I finally got taken out of the yards, and I got put in the kitchen. And whilst I was in the kitchen, I settled down a little bit. And one day over the amplifiers, they called out, anyone wish to join AA? Fall out at 10 a.m. And I had heard of it, because as I said to you, you can't go in and out of mental institutions and places like I went through alcohol and not hear about alcoholics. But I believe today, sitting here with my lovely wife and talking to my beautiful friends, that God was waiting. He's a very patient and loving God, believe me. He sat back and he waited. You know, you don't pluck a apple or a peach off a tree unless it's ripe. And he waited for me to be ripe. God waited for me to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. And he picked me off the tree. That's what I believe. And I went across and I got on the line with 7 other men. And I went into the Yatla group of Alcoholics Anonymous. The Yatla, and we called it the Leopard Den. And these men and women that give their weekend livelihood away to come up to the prison to share their story, their strength and their hope with each other's, that I learned about Alcoholics Anonymous. And there was an old man that used to come up there, and he was a wealthy person. He had a business in the city. Gordy knew him, Bowtie Al. And he used to come up, and he was a lovely person. He taught me a lot. He really did. And after the meeting finished, we'd sit around and we'd talk. And I got my sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous. One of these people that come up to the prison and sponsored you when you come out. And I went to that meeting every Sunday for quite a few weeks before I was released from that prison. And in that prison, I started to find hope. I started to find hope for the first time in my life. I started to get a belief that if I stuck with this mob, I'd do all right. And I wasn't wrong. They looked after me like a mother hen sits on her chicks and puts her wings around it to keep the cold away and keep the warmth in. And you know, even today, when I go through the doors of an AA meeting, I feel that warmth come within. It's a wonderful feeling. And you know, I believe fully that every time I go to an AA meeting, I feel God's presence in that room. I fully believe, and Gordon will tell you this, I fully believe that God's Spirit comes into that room and he sits alongside of each and individual member and touches them. And we fortunate ones, he touches us in our heart. We feel God's love and strength. And you know, I've been doing that for a lot of years, a day at a time. And I'm speaking to you beautiful people here tonight for my AA 55th birthday. And the one that set me up for this is in this room, that Gordy. He barreled me for this. He wasn't going to let it go by. But to tell you the God's truth, he didn't hurt my arm, twisting it up my back to do it. I'll do anything, anywhere, anytime, for this loving friendship, for this loving fellowship that I have the privilege to be a member of. I'm too old now to do the things I used to do. I'd get a phone call from Victoria, and that's 500 miles from where I lived. And I'd jump in my old beat-up Volkswagen I bought, my first car I ever owned, first car ever, and I was sober, and that's how I got it. And I'd drive that old Volkswagen all the way across to Victoria, because I got a phone call that an AA member needed me. I would even crawl there on my hands and knees if I had to get to that member that needed me. Where would each of us in this room be tonight that didn't have that attitude of the necessariness of need? We're all needed in lots of various ways. There's a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous that has never done a 12-step call, never gone on the phones, never served on the AA committee. I served for years on the AA Central Service. And anything I've ever done in AA, it's always been a big volume of years. I never done nothing by half. Doesn't it tell us in AA, half measures availeth? You know, I'll go to any length at any time. I've served AA in just about every capacity. I've been on the jail committee. I started the jail panel committee going, and because it closed down in our prisons here, and I got it going again. And I was the prison panel officer for good 10 years. And I always went to the prisons. What I had to learn to do was to do my rossiters. When we rossitered out the rossiter, to do my rossiters. That was a must, to be there on my rossiter day. Other than that, I could go any time that I wished. And I corresponded with them in the prison. there was one chap in there, he joined the AA group, and his name was Braille Henry. That was his nickname. He learnt Braille whilst in prison. He was in for murder, but he did it in an alcoholic rage. I'm not here tonight to tell you his story, but it wasn't very nice what happened to that man. Apparently he come home from work and he's caught his wife in bed with another man. And he opened his wardrobe, took a 12-gauge shotgun out and blew them both away. And he was pretty damn drunk when he done it. Well, you know, I worked for 10 years. 10 years I worked through the prison authorities. And the controller of prisons at the time, old Jumbo Allen, he and I became very, very close friends. And I used to go up to his home down on the beach at Henley Beach. Could you imagine that? The filthy life I lived through, drinking and boozing and fighting and lying and cheating and thieving. Here I am in the controller of prison's home, sharing his wife's company and him for an evening meal. This is what Alcoholics Anonymous did for me. You see, Jumbo Allen realised that perhaps this AA way would be the way for a lot of men. And that's why he allowed it in the prisons system. And it went right through our system. It went to the country prisons. I used to travel up to them meetings on odd occasions. Alcoholics Anonymous has a very long arm. And if there's any young or near new members or new members in this room tonight, you remember those words I just said, that Alcoholics Anonymous has a very long arm, and it'll reach out to you in any moment, in any second, in any one God-given hour that you need it. I know it did for me many a times. And I helped start an AA entertainment committee. And we used to run dances. And we used to have lovely dances. And the little dances ended up a massive annual ball every year. And the women used to get up and done up in all their nines, and you wouldn't know them in their lovely long gowns and their hair's done, and their faces all done, and they look beautiful. And these women come from all walks of life like we alcoholics did. Housewives, you know, daughters. And we used to have a ball at these dances. Especially the annual one every year, the annual ball. It ended up to being a 6-monthly ball. And AA gave me these opportunities. You might think I might be bragging a bit and big-noting myself, but I'm not. It's like our co-founders, Bill Bilson and Dr. Bob, and the first 100 members of Alcoholics Anonymous. If them members hadn't had the chance to do the things that I've been doing, and I hope that a lot of you in this room in time will have the advantage of being able to do, where would we be? Where would our fellowship be? We grew in unity, didn't we? I met a member in America, Tommy Lovin, God bless him, many years ago. I'm pretty sure it was Tommy Lovin. And I was getting on the bus to go down to New York City from Los Angeles. And he took me down to the bus station. And when I was about to get on the bus, he said, "Son, can I give you a little message?" And I said, "Yes, I would love it." And he said, "Will you remember?" And you know, I've hung on to that for many years, a day at a time. And what he said to me, he said, "Son, the day you stop learning is the day you're preparing to die." I'll allow a few minutes silence. Well, seconds really, for it to sink into your head if you want to hang on to it. And it's a wonderful thing. It's that wonderful, I want to repeat it again. The day you stop learning is the day you're preparing to die. And I live my life by that in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's a wonderful example. My little dog here is up by my leg, and she's growling a little bit at me. She wants me to pat her and take notice of her. She's my friend. She sits on my lap, in my chair, or in her chair every night. She's taken my chair over. You know, this fellowship taught me how to live, not live again, how to live. It actually taught me how to live and to love. That's a big thing, isn't it? That magic word, love. And you know, it took away a lot for me to get love. One, it took away hatred. That's what AA did. It took hatred right out of my life. I had no more room for it. That's only one of many things it's done for me. And in its place, it sowed the seed of love. And love's like when you put a little seed in the ground, and it grows, and it blossoms into a lovely, lovely flower, a lovely bloom. That's what love is. I hope many of us in this room tonight has got that lovely bloom growing in their heart and in their life. I know I have. And I know how I got it. I got it by attending AA meetings on a regular basis. And I mean on a regular basis. When I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, ladies and gentlemen, I stood out on the Port Road. I stood there waiting to get a bus to go to a meeting. I went to meetings 7 nights a week for 7 long years. Could you believe that? Does that sound unreasonable, do you? Well, believe me, it's not. That's how much damage I've done physically and spiritually in my brain. It took me 7 years going to AA 7 nights a week. That's how I learnt to talk the way I'm talking now. I have so much love in my heart for the beautiful people in this wonderful God-given fellowship. Now, don't get me wrong. Don't think that you can get on with everybody. There's people in AA that might not like your style, or you might not like their style. But we learn how to accept each other That's the gift of sobriety, and the gift of AA is learning how to maintain that love of the fellowship. I can't afford to let resentments creep into my life anymore like they did in my drinking days and in my days getting well, sobering up, getting fit, getting happy. I could have been a top sportsman only for booze. I could have played football at a much higher level. I could have fought at a much more high level. I never talk about the bad things in my life. They're gone. They're not worth harbouring, because all they do help you take a step backwards. And we can't afford to take a step backwards. We've got to step forward, a little at a time. I remember when it was a half an inch and then an inch, until it grew into a foot, and then another foot, and another foot. What I'm trying to say is, AA teaches us how to live again, love again, hope again, care again, and share. And you notice I never said again. AA taught me how to share for the first thing in my life, the love of the fellowship you people gave me to share on to others. And that's why I'm a meetings person, for 3 reasons. One is because it's a way of life for me today, and the second one is I'm not forgetting where I come from. And the third one is I love you all so very much. I love you with every fibre of my body, the same as I love my wife and family, because you all are my family, a day at a time. It's a wonderful way to live. And I think one of the greatest things I ever learnt in life was to be able to say one little word followed by a big word. And I often say it to my darling wife. And I say it to anyone I think I may have harmed or made the wrong approach to in a wrong way. And that little 2-letter word's a very big word for me. I'm sorry. And I'd like to repeat that word. I'm sorry. It was a hard thing, a bitter pill for me to swallow. Be able to openly stand up, sit down, no matter how, just look a person in the eyes and say, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of you all, and I'm saying a prayer, asking God to give all of you His love and tender care. God bless all.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.